Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Access Blockbusters Pod. Welcome back to episode number 71. And it's a Doomsday kind of week. Not in a bad way. You know, it's been a good week for me, at least. I don't know about you guys. It's been a busy week for sure. And hopefully you guys had a good week as well if you're listening to the podcast when it comes out on the audio platforms on Saturday. That's right. For those of you who don't know, just maybe it's a good time to reiterate the schedule of the podcast. I record a podcast throughout the week and then compile them all the different segments into the full episode that you hear every single Saturday. And for those of you who are thinking, wait, I thought that the podcast doesn't come out until Monday or Tuesday, that's because you're watching on YouTube, which if you are doing, thank you so much. But for those of you who want to hear the entire podcast as soon as it's available, it is available on Saturday mornings every single week. This week, actually, though, because of the Snow White review, it might be coming out on Sunday morning. So Saturday or Sunday morning on the audio platforms, that is Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Overcast Overcast. What am I saying? On the audio platforms, usually 8 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Central, 11 a.m. Eastern. Saturday, usually Saturday morning, but if there's a review that I need to kind of push the podcast out on Sunday morning. So this week it'll probably be out on Sundays. But of course, the podcast and all the segments are available throughout the week on the YouTube channel, the Access Blockbusters YouTube channel. So make sure to subscribe, give this video a like if you are listening or watching on YouTube. And if you are listening on the audio only platforms, make sure to rate the podcast as well. It is, like I said, a Doomsday kind of week. So not only will we be talking about the full cast announcement of Avengers Doomsday, but we'll also be talking about what the implications are for the film and who might be missing, what the X-Men might mean. So a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. But of course, other things like Severance Season 2, Ahsoka Season 2, Daredevil Episode 5 and 6. So a lot of fun stuff. Let's get into the topics without further ado. Alrighty, guys, of all the shows that have ever showed in terms of Star Wars, Ahsoka was definitely one of them. Now, to be fair to Ahsoka, it had one of my favorite Star Wars anythings ever. And that was, of course, episode 5 of Ahsoka Season 1, which was basically the glorified Clone Wars live-action episode. And for that, I would be forever grateful to Ahsoka. That being said, the show on the whole was really weird. And, I mean, this wasn't the only reason that I didn't love the show in particular. I didn't hate it, but I just didn't love it. One of the reasons in particular was that by the end of the show, the characters just switched places. So you had Ezra and Thrawn just hanging out on, was it Peridea? I think Peridea. And then Ahsoka and Sabine were going to find them, I suppose, looking for Ezra. And then by the end of the episode, Thrawn and Ezra have escaped, and Ahsoka and Sabine are on Peridea. It's weird. I really don't understand what the point of that was. Anyways, apparently, we're getting an Ahsoka Season 2. Because I say the word apparently because before this news, and even this news isn't complete concrete information, but I think the little hints here and there that we've been getting have basically confirmed to us that Ahsoka Season 2 is coming. And this is just another level to that confirmation because the actor who played Ezra Bridger, Iman Esfandi, and I probably butchered that name, but let's call him Iman. Iman posted, or actually he reposted something else that a friend of his said, and this is all on Instagram. And his friend said basically this. He said, quote, "Congrats, Iman, for launching your podcast, Keepers of the Fire." I didn't know you had a podcast. And kicking off Ahsoka Season 2. So, again, I mean, is this Disney coming out and saying Ahsoka Season 2 coming 2027? No, it's nothing like that. Is this basically the next nail in the coffin to say Ahsoka Season 2 is happening? Yeah, I think it is. And look, I think because we've gotten other confirmation before about the Hound, the actor who played the Hound in Game of Thrones replacing Ray Stevenson. So, I mean, Ahsoka Season 2 is definitely in production. I don't think this is the news that we're talking about here. I think maybe we can look into the words kicking off because I think that if they're celebrating the fact that Ahsoka Season 2 is kicking off, then I think that probably means that we're getting close to production, which is interesting, right? Because, Skeleton Crew came out in December, and I loved Skeleton Crew. But as of right now, it doesn't look like we're getting another live-action Star Wars series other than Andor for quite a while. And if Ahsoka Season 2 is just now kicking off production, maybe it can target late 2026, I suppose, so we'll still get another Star Wars series next year. But again, I think that it's an interesting thing that, we're getting confirmation from the actor, or the friend of the actor who plays Ezra, that Ahsoka Season 2 is well on its way. And look, for all the things that I don't like about Ahsoka, because I didn't hate it. I just thought it was kind of boring at certain points, and it was really meandering at other points. And like I said, what's the point of the show? The point of the show is that Ahsoka and Thrawn just kind of talk to one another, and then they switch places, and that's about it. So I'm hoping that Ahsoka Season 2 dives a little deeper into what's going on post-Episode 6, because that's really what this show is. It's really I mean, you have your other shows like Skeleton Crew that are just not concerned at all with that, and that's totally fine. I love Skeleton Crew. Skeleton Crew is by far and away my favorite show Star Wars has ever made. But I think this is the show, if you're going to make this kind of show, that it should dive into, okay, what's going on here? You know, what's happening post Return of the Jedi? And let's flesh out this world. Let's flesh out what Thrawn is trying to do, because Thrawn just kind of stood around and was like, hey, I'm coming back. And he came back. Okay, great. What happens now? And I think that Ahsoka, meanwhile, if you're going to explore the Mortis gods, okay, let's explore the Mortis gods, but do it in such a way that it makes sense to the story. So I'm interested. I'm intrigued by Ahsoka Season 2. I don't think it's a show that would not, do well with a Season 2. I think that it has potential as long as they learn from the mistakes that they had made in the past. And I don't know if that's a guarantee, because I think that Dave Filoni will continue to make Ahsoka. So I think that he will be the same creative force behind it. So we'll have to see how it progresses from there. So guys, what do you think, or what do you make of the fact that it looks like Ahsoka Season 2 is kicking off? Does that mean it's entering production now? What do you guys think of this? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, so let's talk about Snow White, the latest Disney live-action remake of their original classic Disney princess movies. This is going to be a non-spoiler and spoiler review. I know that this is coming out just a little bit later than the movie itself, so if you haven't seen it by now, then, chances are you probably aren't going to, based on the reception of this movie, but maybe you are, and if that's the case, this first part is going to be completely non-spoiler, and then we'll move into spoilers in the next section. I'll clearly delineate when we do so. So no worries about that. Feel free to stick around even if you haven't seen the movie. So let's get into it. So Snow White. Snow White is, like I said, the latest in the line of live-action Disney remakes, with especially the princess ones, but also things like Lion King, Jungle Book, etc., etc. And they've been hit or miss, in my opinion. And I know that your mileage may vary. Some people really hate these, and some people think that they're pretty good in general. And I happen to vary on a lot of them. For example, I really, really like The Jungle Book. I really, really like Aladdin. And I preface this by saying that I am somebody who did not grow up on the original Disney animation films. I watched most of them when I was younger. I grew up as a Pixar kid. So I don't have the same inherent nostalgia as a lot of people do for these live action remakes. I've also said, though, it's a weird thing for me, because sometimes when they, when I do see a property being remade that I do have that inherent nostalgia for, we've been talking about How to Train Your Dragon a lot recently, and that's definitely something I have nostalgia for. And when I see the live action trailer, I go, wow, it's hitting me, even though I know it's just a blatant ripoff, blatant remake, shot by shot remake. And how do you square that? So, but I do think that there are films like Aladdin, for example, the live action Aladdin film. I love that movie. It's great. It's awesome. I think it's one of the best ones they've made. Where I do think, yes, you stick to obviously A Whole New World and Friend Like Me and whatnot, but you put your own spin on it and you make it a little bit different at the very least, and I appreciate it for that. Snow White, though, and to be fair, Snow White didn't have, I would say, out of all of the classic Disney films, Snow White's source material wasn't the most rich to draw from, I would say. I think Snow White, correct me if I'm wrong, is Snow White the earliest Disney animated film? I think so. And obviously storytelling was just different back then, right? It's, Beauty and the Beast came out in the 90s. I think Snow White came out in the 50s? I could be totally wrong, but a long time ago. And so things are just different, right? I think one example of this as they were transitioning this into live action was, how do you handle the seven dwarves, right? And I think there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of decision making. We will talk about my thoughts on how they eventually handled them in just a second, but there was a lot of talk about that. So, Snow White, it was interesting. And on top of that, they cast Gal Gadot as the evil queen, which was an interesting casting, to be sure. And they cast Rachel Zegler as Snow White, who I didn't have any problem with that, but I know a lot of the internet did, and that's, again, for some people it was just their opinion that they just didn't like Rachel Zegler being cast. It is what it is. And some people, it's like the same reaction I would have had if when I saw Jesse Eisenberg being cast as Lex Luthor, I was like, okay, we'll see. We'll judge it when it happens. And sure enough, I thought it was terrible. But other corners of the internet are much more malicious, and I think that that's terrible. Like, it's weird. Anyways. And so the trailers have come out, and the trailers just not gotten me excited. And I don't know. I mean, the first reactions, we talked about them, came out and they were pretty positive, but then the first reviews came out and they were really mixed. And so I went into the movie and I was like, let's just see, because honestly, sometimes they rate these, the critics generally think that these live action remakes are not super great. And then they come out and, for example, The Little Mermaid, I don't think is the best thing ever, but I thought it was entertaining. And Beauty and the Beast. I actually enjoyed Beauty and the Beast somewhat. I think a lot of people who really loved the original did not like Beauty and the Beast so much, but for me, I actually quite liked Beauty and the Beast. I thought it was fine. It was pretty good, the one with Emma Watson. So we went into Snow White. And Snow White, to me, is probably one of the worst Disney live-action remakes they've ever done. Now, to be fair, I didn't sit in my seat and go, I hate this. This is terrible. This is awful filmmaking, awful acting. None of that, right? I think actually in general, while I haven't loved a lot of the live action remakes, I don't think I've hated too many of them either. I think that for the most part, the floor is relatively okay, and the ceiling is something like Aladdin or Jungle Book. So, for the most part, I think my least favorite is probably Mulan. And Mulan, actually, we reviewed. It was one of the first reviews we've ever done on the channel. It was in 2020 during the pandemic, and I really didn't like Mulan. I thought that one was just an example of this is bizarre, and I don't know what they were thinking when they were making it that way. Snow White is probably my second least favorite, but I think that the gap between Mulan and Snow White is pretty big in terms of the fact that I was just bored by Snow White. And like I said, it comes down to a few things here. Number one is that, again, I just don't think the source material is super compelling to pull from. Again, this is a movie it's drawing from an animated movie that came out a long time ago. Storytelling sensibilities have changed. And, you could have taken the route of completely redoing it and adapting it. In fact, other studios have done that. Snow White and the Huntsman was an example of that. So Disney decided, no, we're going to kind of stick to the same general formula of we're going to, pretty much stick to the story and maybe change a few things here and there, add a song here or there. And so there is that. And it's not super compelling. The story was just going along and plodding along, and things just happen, and one thing happens after another, and when things come to a resolution, they feel very anticlimactic. And the movie just ended. And honestly, it was an hour and 40 minutes, and it felt like 2.5 hours. It just kept dragging along because things kept happening, but they didn't really tie into one another, and you jump into a song. And I will say the music. I know that some of the music is from the original movie. I believe so, right? I haven't seen the original movie, if ever, for a long time. And I think some of the songs are new. That's usually how they do the remakes. The songs were just random and, kept popping in here and there. And it just felt like, okay, we're moving from song to song and then we're just kind of going along. Kind of similar to the experience I had watching Emilia Paris, a very different movie, by the way. But when the music happened, I was like, oh, okay. Music is happening, unlike a movie like Wicked, where the songs really drove the narrative forward. So it's an interesting thing. In terms of the acting, I think Rachel Zegler has the voice of an angel. I think she was phenomenal in West Side Story, and her singing ability is next to none. I mean, she is right up there to me in terms of, and movie musicals, at least in terms of Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. Like, she's right there, right? Her voice is beautiful. She wasn't given the best material, in my opinion, in Snow White. The dialogue for her, it was this weird mix of trying to keep to that original style, that almost sing-songy kind of way that, some of the Disney princesses talk in the animated films. And I feel weird about this because I love her in West Side Story. She was an amazing Maria. But ever since then, everything I've seen her in, and I haven't seen everything that she's done, to be fair, like Y2K or the other films, or the Hunger Games, to be fair. And I heard she was pretty good in the Hunger Games. But the two films, Shazam! Fury of the Gods and now Snow White, I've looked at it and gone, they just haven't given her the best material. And I don't know if it's just the choice of film and or whatnot. But and again, she's a young and up and coming actress, and so I'm sure she'll have her choice of great movies to pick from. So I thought she was fine as Snow White. Nothing really memorable, but again, her voice is spectacular. The guy who plays the prince, though, because it's a movie. I mean, not about the romance necessarily, but it is a part of the story. Obviously, if you know Snow White, I thought the prince and Snow White had zero chemistry, and whoever was playing the prince, I don't know the actor. I looked him up, and I honestly already forget his name. It was like a knockoff Fiyero from Wicked. He had no chemistry with Snow White. He was a very bland character, and I had nothing. I didn't care about him at all, which was really weird because, you're kind of supposed to, this part of the story really hinges on these two characters, and it's just a strange thing. Before we get to the dwarves, let's talk about Gal Gadot as the Evil Queen. I hate to say this again because I feel like I'm a broken record. She wasn't given the best material to work with. I mean, it's an evil queen, and it's not like I'm not asking for Thanos here. I'm not asking for us to understand everything with the evil queen. She's a very vain character, right? So there's not a whole lot to go off of here. She's okay. I mean, Gal Gadot is fine as the evil queen, and I don't know if this was the role that she was born to play. I definitely don't think it was. Also, in terms of costumes, some costumes translate much better into live action than others. For example, I don't know. I think in general, like Aladdin was really good. Beauty and the Beast was pretty good. Little Mermaid was pretty good. The costume here in for the evil queen it just didn't really work for me. It felt very fake somehow, very costumey. And I don't think that was a good thing. It's a minor nitpick in the grand scheme of things. But speaking of visuals, let's talk about the dwarves. I'll admit that, and I go into any of these movies with an open mind, and I knew what the dwarves looked like from the trailers, and I said, okay, let's try to, I really want to try and whatever they look like on the big screen, just try to get used to it and try to, try to like it, right? Try to just get used to it, because the more I could get used to it, the better the movie experience could be for me. And I will say, when it's just them on the screen, it does look like a bizarre video game. It doesn't even look like an animated movie. It looks like a video game, but it's okay. The second they're next to anyone real, it looks so off. It looks so strange. And I just can't shake the feeling, right? After seeing Lord of the Rings in 2024, right? Rings of Power. And I don't, say what you will about the story and whatever. But just the design. Or The Hobbit, right? Of how they do the dwarves. I don't understand why we couldn't have just done that for these characters. I don't know if they really... Why did we have to go with these weird garden gnome kind of designs where the faces are so plasticky? And I just thought it was so strange. Again, I think the characterizations were fine. Totally fine. I mean, there's some nice moments with the dwarves for sure, but the character designs are just so bizarre, and I just can't understand. And to be fair, I know there was some backstory behind the discussions of changing the designs and whatnot, and I haven't really read too much into that. So if you guys know, let me know in the comments. But the designs were just strange, and I just don't understand them. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, it's all visuals, and I always say visuals almost never make or break a movie, but it is distracting, I will admit. So, look, at the end of the day, I think that this movie was boring and it was bland, and I don't think it's the fault of anyone in particular. Like, some people came out of the movie saying Gal Gadot was horribly miscast or Rachel Zegler was bad. I don't think any of that, really. I just think that the source material that they were pulling from kind of doomed them from the start, because if they weren't going to do anything super, super original with the movie, I just don't think that there's a whole lot to draw from Snow White. Maybe that's, blasphemous for those of you who have nostalgia for Snow White. And if you do, that's awesome. And I hope you love the movie. I thought that the movie moved very slowly and things just kind of happened one after the other. And we're just kind of expected to get on board with certain things, like with the prince. He's not a prince. What's his name? Jonathan and Snow White. And I wasn't sold. I wasn't sold. So those are my non-spoiler thoughts on Snow White. We're going to transition into spoilers very quickly. There's really not a whole lot to talk about here, but we'll talk about them, and then we'll be on our way. So this is the spoiler section. Here we go. Yeah, I think that the whole, because the whole thing towards the end, right, of you need a true love's kiss, and that's obviously very much from the animated movie, and whatever. It's part of the source material. We're supposed to really care about the relationship between Jonathan and Snow White, and I just don't. I just never got on board with it. It was so random. He was such a bland character. The motivations for the characters were so flimsy. And I don't think that's really, not to make excuses for the movie, but I just don't know if it's the movie's fault if you're drawing from the original movie, because they, when you're making a movie like Snow White, way long ago, nobody really cared about these kinds of things. And that's fine. It is what it is. But when you're translating it in live action, it feels glaring, right? So there's that. I like the dwarves' personalities, which is interesting and odd to say, because obviously they only have one really one personality trait. But I like Dopey, you know, the whole mini story arc that they do with him and speaking and whatnot. Again, there's the designs. The designs are so distracting sometimes. Not always, right? Like I said, you know, you kind of get used to it here and there, but when they're next to people, it's so weird. It's just so strange. So yeah, there's that. And then the way that this is the only other spoiler thing, because honestly, there's not a whole lot to spoil in this movie, but the ending with the evil queen dying was just so anticlimactic, because they're on the bridge, they're talking, and she's like, enough, and then she just kind of walks away, and then she goes into the mirror, and that's it. So again, I don't hate the movie, and maybe, I don't know, maybe if I watched the original Snow White, I might think the exact same thing. I might be like, yeah, this is really weirdly bland, and maybe that's not a popular thing to say. And again, if you like Snow White, if you love Snow White, I celebrate that. But for me, I watched this movie and I go, I just was bored for the most part, and I really wanted to like it. And for those of you who are saying, oh, he just hates these Disney live action remakes, or he hates Disney princess films or Disney animated films, you know, remakes, I loved Aladdin. Like I said, I loved Aladdin. I like The Little Mermaid. I like Beauty and the Beast. I like Tangled. You know, it's not the genre, it's not the remake, it's just, I think this particular film just didn't really land with me. So guys, those are my thoughts on the new 2025 Disney live action Snow White. What did you think about it? If you've seen it, if you haven't, is this a film that you're going to look forward to watching on Disney Plus, or maybe you'll skip out on this one? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, now that we're a little more calm, cool, and collected, at least compared to the immediate reaction to Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6, let's talk about it in a little more detail, shall we? As we do every week with these big shows, let's talk about Daredevil Born Again. This is going to be a full spoiler discussion, so if you have not seen Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6, no worries. Just make sure to save this segment, save the podcast, save whatever medium you're watching or listening to this for later. And then once you have seen the episodes, come back and join us, and we'll be talking about Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6. Or if you just don't care about spoilers, no problem at all. Welcome in, and let's get going. So, as I mentioned in my immediate reaction, I'm not going to lie. It's taken a little bit for me to kind of articulate this to myself, and then I think to the audience as well. I don't think I'm loving this show. Now, I say this, I'm not somebody who hates it, right? I've seen there's been this weird polarizing effect where, lo and behold, you know, what a shocker that the internet is polarized about something related to a big franchise. Some people seem to really love the show, and some people seem to really hate the show. And for me, I'm, as usual, not really in either camp. I am somewhere where I like a decent bit of what I'm seeing, but it's not clicking for me. And as I mentioned in my immediate reaction, I think maybe a part of it is that I'm watching the original show concurrently, and the original show is just, to me at least, so clearly on a different level. And part of the reason is, and we'll talk about this especially as it pertains to episode 5, which I strongly believe is majority what was in the original show with the episode by episode legal procedural. And it was honestly the last scene in this episode that cemented it for me. But there are a lot of other things in there as well we'll talk about. But I think what it is for me is that Daredevil seasons 1 through 3, right? Every episode was decently self-contained. And it's not like there weren't subplots, there weren't mini arcs that were going on throughout the entire season. Of course, I just started season 2. And Punisher, right? The Punisher is not, I mean, Punisher is throughout the season, but, you know, there are a lot of other things that happen in season 2, like Elektra and the Hand, and I think Kingpin comes back a little bit later. But episodes 1 through 3 are very Punisher focused, right? But each episode flows in to one another. And I think the original idea for the show, and I understand now why they pivoted, right? Because they probably looked at it and went, this isn't what Daredevil was. And granted, they didn't, you know, scrap everything. They kept a decent bit of it. I think all of episode 5, or the vast majority of it, was kept from the original concept. But I think the original concept, it became clear to me, was just episode by episode, let's just do a little adventure of the week with Daredevil, and then maybe something happens at the end of the show. And while it's not bad, it just isn't as good as what the original show is, in my opinion. So, you know, I think that's part of the reason why the show is not clicking for me, because a lot of these episodes feel like they're meandering a little bit. And I feel like a lot of the subplots as well, I'm not clicking with them as much as I feel like I want to. And, you know, we'll talk about it when we get to the very last scenes of this episode, or of these episodes, episode 6, because the ending of episode 6, my goodness. But, people might ask me, well, okay, but it's all in service of build-up, right? Because you can't just, have Daredevil be Daredevil the whole season. It's about him rediscovering who he is, and Kingpin, acquiescing to his darker nature. And so you got to build up to it, right? Don't just complain. It's slow. I get that. I totally get that. You've got to build it up. But honestly, I feel like the build-up itself was not super interesting. And when we get to the last bits of episode 6, I'm like, yes, but not because I'm like, oh, it's so earned, but because it's just good to see them, or good to see Daredevil. He's back to being Daredevil. And Kingpin, you're like, okay, this is the Kingpin that I knew and not loved, but hated, but loved to hate, And it feels more like me as somebody who loved the original series saying, oh my gosh, we're back to this, rather than me saying, oh, Daredevil born again. What a great build up to this return to Daredevil, if that makes sense. We'll get there. So let's start out with episode 5 and we'll go into episode 6. Episode 5 being the Yusuf Khan, Kamala Khan's dad episode. I really thought at the end of the episode when he says, let's go to dinner, that we were going to see Kamala Khan, but she's off in California, Young Avengers-ing, it would appear. And so that's an interesting connection. And also episode 6 has an interesting MCU connection as well, which we knew about before, but we'll, again, touch on that in just a second. So episode 5 starts out. It is St. Patrick's Day in New York. And we get to see right away Kamala Khan's father, Yusuf Khan. So there he is. And he mentions right away that Kamala is visiting California, visiting some friends. So obviously that's some Young Avengers, wink and blink and you'll miss it kind of thing. I think that, yeah, last time we saw Kamala Khan, she was still in New York, though, because I think Kate Bishop was still in New York. So maybe she's going to visit Cassie Lang. That probably is the implication of where she and probably Kate are as well. So that's kind of fun. But yeah, he, the actor who plays Kamala Khan's dad, he has such a charm to him. And I really like him, the character at least, because I know I heard some things about the actor, and I don't want to get into any of that right now, but I just, as a character, I think that he's great. Just the natural charm and good-naturedness. Everyone still remember that scene in episode 1 or 2 of Miss Marvel where he dresses up as the Hulk and tries to really, endear himself to his daughter. And he's so proud of Kamala Khan. He's so proud of Miss Marvel. I love that. And I think this is this MCU connection totally works. It's totally fine. Does it feel a little forced? Maybe. Maybe because, what in the world are the chances that Daredevil runs into him in the bank? But, it's still good to see him. So apparently Matt Murdock is trying to get a loan because their law firm is trying to expand as well. And then these Irish gang members basically come and try to rob the bank. And I wondered if there was going to be any connection to the Irish gang that Punisher took out at the beginning of season 2. Again, very top of mind for me as I'm watching season 2. But doesn't look like they mentioned anything like that in this episode. So Matt then decides he leaves the bank, but he hears the robbers, and he decides to walk back in. And look, even for Matt Murdock, that is a little bit bold because, he's not wearing his Daredevil costume, and these are guns. And Matt Murdock against a bunch of guns, I don't know. But again, it's Matt Murdock, and we know he's going to be okay. So I just thought it was interesting. Matt Murdock walking straight into a gunfight. And poor Mr. Khan, he's being forced to open the bank vault because he is the assistant to the bank manager, for those of you who get that reference. So yeah, I think that, it's a gutsy move by Matt, but he's still trying to be a hero, still trying to be a good guy, even without the Daredevil costume. So then we get to this back and forth between the lead Irish guy, I don't even remember his name, and the detective outside, Angie Kim. This was one of the strangest things I've ever seen. This just flat out did not work for me. It was, I'm not going to say it was cringy. I don't know if it was cringy or not, but this, whatever this was going on, tell me a joke. And she tells him a joke. And this back and forth of, hey, I don't have all day, where's my stuff? I was sitting there going, what are we doing here? Like, this is part of the show. I think in episode 4, there were some things in there that I just really didn't like either. Because it's not like the Vanessa Kingpin subplot, which to me, I get what they're going for there. It's not clicking with me. BB Urich, same thing. I get what they're going for. Not clicking with me super well. This whole thing, this little back and forth, that drags out for at least 5 minutes of screen time in this episode. What was that? I just really, let me know in the comments. Am I the only one who thought this was the most bizarre set of sequences that they just dragged on? Like, these two characters were just talking for 5 minutes, and the whole joke scene was just, my gosh, that was weird. And look, I have to say, if their idea of gritty and grounded, if their idea of that is the character is saying the F word a bunch of times. That's not what gritty and grounded is. Like, they don't have to curse at all for it to be, reminiscent of the original show. And just because these Irish guys are saying the F word all the time in this episode, and just because, again, later on Matt says the F word, which, it's in a different context, but I mean, just because they insert that word into the dialogue not even once in a while, pretty often, it doesn't make the show any better or any worse. It makes it feel like it's trying too hard. So I was just annoyed by a lot of those little things that were going on here. I will admit that most of this hostage sequence, though, was fairly tense and decent. And look, the Irish guys, for the most part, were really silly. And the fact that they even let Matt use the restroom, even that was really ridiculous and really silly. Also, the fact that Mr. Khan has so much trust in a man, in Matt Murdock, that he's never met before, but Matt's like, can you just stall and risk your entire life? You might get shot. Again, I know that's not the intention of the episode, but these are just little things that I was picking up on throughout the episode. But still, and I also didn't have Matt speaking in an Irish accent, Charlie Cox speaking in an Irish accent on my bucket list for today, but on my bingo card, but there it is. He did it. And so... I think that there are just some little things in this episode that kind of cue you into the fact that this is just sort of a lighter, breezier episode that just doesn't feel super weighty. If that makes sense. I did like, though, Matt cracking open the safe. I think that is a really interesting use of his powers. I don't remember if he explicitly did this in any of the first 3 seasons of Daredevil, but I did like that. It's a really good use of his powers. I believe he did something similar at one point, but I can't be sure as well. But yeah, the episode feels very episodic, and it, some of the things are very, very silly. So, anyways, we have this whole thing. So I guess the way that this connects to the overarching story is that these guys are working for some kind of boss, who I'm assuming is going to be Vanessa, although based on what happens with Kingpin in episode 6, it could be Kingpin, but who knows. And maybe it's Muse, I guess. I don't know. Maybe it's Muse. I do like Matt using his wits, though, to get through most of this. And then he gets in a swipe, as he's escaping with the smoke in the bank, and he gets in a swipe at one of the guards. So, again, it's a fun and cute little scene here. And then you see Matt Murdock going after the guy. And again, this is the thing where, for episode 4, right, the vast majority of episode 4, I was like, yeah, it's just kind of going. And then, bam, it hits you. Right, it really hits you. Episode 2, similar thing. Yeah, the episode was going, and then bam, the ending action sequence, and Matt going after the guy, and that leg kick. Oh my gosh, that leg kick! I literally gasped. I know we've seen it in the trailers, but seeing it in the context of the show and seeing just the full force of it, I gasped. I was like, whoa! Oh my gosh, that was crazy. So then we get a closing of this episode where he meets Mr. Khan again. And they're talking, let's get dinner, and I hope that gets paid off at some point in Miss Marvel Season 2, maybe. He also pays off that line from Spider-Man No Way Home where he says he's a really good lawyer, which is fun. I enjoy that. So it feels like, again, a decent episode to a different kind of show. And the way that I really feel like this was just part of a completely different show was the ending. Because the ending was totally that, in Looney Tunes, anyone watch Looney Tunes or Tom and Jerry, where the last little thing in the episode is a little gag or a little joke, and the camera just kind of pans in with a circle spotlight as the rest of the screen fades to black on the main character, and he kind of winks at the screen, and then it goes to black, right? Curtains close. I don't know if anybody gets that or if anyone can visualize what I'm talking about there. That's exactly what I got from this last scene here, where, Matt's like, oh, let me just eat one of these candies, wink, wink, and then he leaves, and then Mr. Khan picks up the diamond in the candy bowl, and it literally almost is like that, da-da-da-da-da-da, and like the episode ends there. And to me, that is really symbolic of what I think the original concept of the show was. And look, it's not terrible, right? It's not terrible. It's just not Daredevil. And it just also, even in the context of this show, right, it doesn't feel that consequential. I get it that later, right, in episode 6, let's transition into episode 6, which is a Muse-centric episode. Also Swordsman, shout out Swordsman, who we see Jack Duquesne later on, which I have some questions about, but again, we'll get to that later. But again, I get that we have this whole sequence at the beginning, which by the way, I love whenever they bring up Matt's Catholic side, where he's praying over the picture of Foggy. I think that's great, right? I think that he sees flashbacks to his violent nature in the past few episodes, and I get that. I don't know if this was a function of this just not being the plan originally and they just didn't reshoot it or whatever. But in those moments, though, right, where in the moment, I mean, in episode 2, he screams, right? And that you kind of feel that. But in episode 4, or episode 5, excuse me, where he's going after that Irish guy, and he commits that, he becomes violent again. There's no remorse, right? It's just cut to the next scene. And so yes, you can have him cutting back to him those sequences, but they don't have weight to them, right? Because it's only in these flashback moments where you're like, oh, I guess he's thinking about them. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Something that I was thinking about. So, anyways, you get some scenes here where Luca is talking to Kingpin. Luca, I think, is the guy, one of the leaders of the gang, the crime family or the crime people that Vanessa is dealing with, and he owes Kingpin money. 1.8, something about 1.8 and 2.8. Honestly, I don't really know what they're talking about here. And then we have intercut with that Heather talking about vigilantes, very, very, very pointed. And we get Kingpin finally getting wind of what Muse is doing, painting the murals with blood here, and he paints one with Kingpin, which is interesting. And so we get hints here that with the kidnappings going on, and they're all connected to Muse at some point. Then we get some scenes with Hector Ayala's niece, Angela, I believe it's Angela. I'm of two minds of this. I mean, I get what she's saying, do something about it. Obviously, it gets her kidnapped, so she, was being way too rash about it. And also, what does she expect Matt to do, really? She doesn't know he's Daredevil. I mean, of course, that's the inciting incident to him becoming Daredevil again. But what does she know? To me, it was a little bit ridiculous of her being like, what, do something, or else I'm going to do something. And I'm like, he's a lawyer. He's a blind lawyer, though. Anyways. And I wish, I said this again last episode, I wish we got more time with her. She just kind of randomly appeared last episode, and then she kind of randomly appears again in this episode, and she becomes kind of the linchpin of why Matt becomes Daredevil again. So, I don't know. It's just something that I wish we got a little bit more screen time with. So, anyways, we have some more scenes with Muse. He is terrifying. We'll get to him in just a little bit. And then we get Jack Duquesne, who's talking to Kingpin, who's at this fancy party talking about port expansion. And I have questions about this. From what we saw at the end of Hawkeye, Jack Duquesne escaped everything, and then that's all great and fine, and Eleanor Bishop went to jail. Eleanor Bishop, who was working with Kingpin, I don't think Jack Duquesne ever interacted with Kingpin, so I don't think he knew specifically that that Eleanor Bishop was working for Kingpin. That being said, I that's my question really, is how much does he actually know? Because he's face to face with the guy who his ex-fiance was working for, this crime boss. And so I don't know. It's a little interesting, but yeah, I mean, it's an interesting connection. Jack Duquesne back here again. And so finally, then we start getting the formation of this anti-vigilante task force, which from set photos from season 2 looks like it's going to be a big part of season 2. The Ayala niece, Angela, gets kidnapped here, and there we go. Matt is back to being Daredevil. I wish he was a little more conflicted about putting the cowl back on instead of... Honestly, that's my one gripe with that scene, is where he just says F it, and I'm like, is it just F it, though, when it's, the reason you're not Daredevil is foggy, right? I mean, your best friend died, so it felt a little too flippant to me, to be quite honest with you. But again, you kind of get where he's coming from, and he knows he has to save Angela and Muse. Muse is just so scary. Muse is like, watching these scenes where Muse is taking Angela's blood is the same feeling I had when you see Kingpin for the first time in Daredevil season 1, and he's just bashing the guy's head in with the car door, and it's just like that level of frightening. And it's crazy. It's crazy. And then Kingpin, we see Kingpin going to the cell with Adam. And speaking of terrifying Kingpin, he's back. So I've been saying this entire season that Kingpin is just not scary anymore. But then you get little hints here and there, right? The end of last episode, I think, ended with Kingpin eating dinner in front of Adam's cell, which was terrifying, really scary. And then we get full Kingpin. He is so back. And Daredevil is so back. And they're both like, this sequence here is... Again, I don't love violence in I'm talking specifically about in film and in media and in cinema specifically. Obviously, real world violence, condemn it. It's atrocious. But just talking about in terms of narrative storytelling, I'm not generally a big fan of on screen violence, but the narrative purpose behind this kind of violence is it's what these characters have been building towards, their inner natures, the Daredevil inside Matt Murdock and the Kingpin inside of Wilson Fisk, and they finally let it out, the darker natures, and the editing behind this sequence is so incredibly well done, to where you're intercutting between the two and you can feel like these are the characters being let out in their full form. It's brutal. The Kingpin beating up Adam is exactly back to the Kingpin we know. This is what the season was building up to. I love the juxtaposition. Again, I wish the build-up felt a little more linear, because it feels like we were just jumping around a little bit too much in the first 5 episodes, where, yeah, like last episode, there was no hint that Matt Murdock was even thinking about Foggy. And that's what I said last episode for the episode 4 spoiler discussion. I was like, I wish that Matt would think about Foggy every once in a while. And I love the beginning of episode 6 where he is, right? And again, I get it. It probably had to do with the retooling of the season and whatnot. And I get it. But still, you know, I really, I mean, it's incredible. The last juxtaposition of the episode. So we had an episode 7, and I hope that this season is finally going to sharpen up here. We're going to see Punisher again. We've seen those set photos and the trailers of the actual Punisher, so we know that. And the question becomes, where are we heading? The anti-vigilante task force, they're going after Muse. Kingpin is, well, I mean, I don't know if he's back. Like, to Vanessa, he'll probably still be just kind of the I'm trying, you know, I'm being a good husband. And Matt Murdock, we'll see where it leaves him now that he's officially put up, you know, the Daredevil costume back on. Is he going to be remorseful, or is he going to be full Daredevil again? Who knows? But like I said, this season has not been the smoothest ride for me. I don't love certain things in certain episodes. I'm not super thrilled with certain subplots, but when they get the show right, you see the show. I see Daredevil, the show, in Daredevil Born Again. And when it works, it just works so well. So I'm hopeful, and more hopeful than ever, honestly, for Daredevil Born Again Season 2, where they have everything, they have the recipe for success, and they just have to execute it. And easier said than done, obviously, easier said than done. But I have hope, right? I really have hope that they're going to be able to get it right. And I think that they're setting up a great end to the season, so hopefully, as long as the season ends well, then it'll be great. Guys, what did you think of Daredevil Born Again episodes 5 and 6? Did you enjoy them? Did you love them both? Or did you like one, not the other? Did you dislike them both? Totally fine. Let me know in the comments and we can have a discussion about it. Would love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, can you believe that it's almost April? In fact, by the time you're watching this individual clip, because I am recording this segment before April, but chances are this clip actually comes out during April, which is crazy to say. So happy April if that's when you're watching this. It's crazy. We're already over a quarter of the way through 2025. And with April comes 2 premiere television shows returning for season 2. One of them is The Last of Us, which we're not going to talk about in this segment, but we will probably be talking about more and more as the days go on. But the other one, of course, is Andor. Andor season 2, the acclaimed Emmy Award nominated show from Star Wars, Andor Season 2, from Tony Gilroy, who, from all accounts, did a lot in terms of story and directing for Star Wars Rogue One. And that film had a very troubled production, but ended up being one of my favorite Star Wars films of all time, is returning to finish off the story of Andor. Now, we'll talk about my thoughts about the trailer in just a second, but I wanted to give a little bit of context before that, because honestly, I saw Andor once, and I saw it in the weekly cadence, right? So I think the first 3 episodes came out all at once, and then we had episodes coming out weekly for a good little bit there. And I'm not gonna lie, I didn't love Andor as much as I thought I would. A lot of people hail Andor as one of the best things Star Wars has ever done. It's so great and it's amazing, and I like Andor. You know, I felt very similarly about Andor as I did with maybe Into the Spider-Verse, which perhaps 2 of my most controversial opinions ever in terms of pop culture is that I like Into the Spider-Verse and I like Andor Season 1. I don't love both of them, which I know both have been hailed as the best things that their franchises have done in a long, long time. So, out of curiosity, I actually, you know, just like I was doing with Daredevil Season 1 and going through the whole series, I actually decided to start rewatching Andor just to see, okay, maybe I missed something. And I have to say, I'm only 4 episodes in. My mind is completely shifted. I'm not saying that Andor is, again, you know, the best thing that Star Wars has ever made. I'm not even saying that it's the best thing that's ever come out on television over the last few years, but it's great. I mean, I think a couple things that dragged it down were even more accentuated because of the weekly release, because some things I admit are still not quite sitting well with me in terms of, I don't love the whole storyline with the backstory in the first 3 episodes, but, when these episodes were coming out weekly, I think that you just had more time to sit in the slowness of the show. And slowness is not a negative thing, in my opinion, in this case. It just means the more dramatic paces of the show. And then, of course, it ratchets itself up with the big action sequences later on. But anyway, so I am now much more excited about Andor Season 2. Another bit of context, though, for me, is that I thought the last trailer for Andor, the first one, I suppose, is just terrible. I think it's one of the worst trailers that Star Wars has ever made. I think the music has a lot to do with it. And I had a lot of conversations with you guys in the comments, and I think it's a totally fair point to say, well, this trailer wasn't meant for us, right? Us being big Star Wars fans, because I think the music was so off-putting, but a lot of you guys in the comments were saying, well, no, I mean, the music, pop music, it's for people who aren't a big fan of Star Wars and just wanted to see something different, and they're like, oh, maybe I'll check this thing out. And I totally get that. I don't know if they had to use the pop music, though. I think they could have made the exact same trailer with some maybe more upbeat and less dramatic Star Wars music, but fine, kind of keep it in the world and still have the same effect, pretty much. I don't know. This is just my take, because we'll never know. It's alternate history, and we don't even have access to these marketing numbers anyways. I don't know how many more people would be convinced to watch Andor just based on a change in music alone. Just based on, I recognize that pop song. I want to watch Andor now. I just don't know how convinced I am by that argument. Anyways, so I saw that, Andor Season 2 had released another trailer, and I was like, okay, let's see how this goes. Guys, this is the trailer. This is the trailer. I love this trailer. And you can't convince me, I'm just being facetious, I'm just playing, but, you can't convince me that this trailer, isn't a trailer that just as much as the last one wouldn't appeal to mass audiences. I think it does both, to be perfectly honest with you. I think that this is a trailer that accomplishes what the last trailer was trying to do, and also appeals to Star Wars fans, because as the trailer went on, this is Welcome to the Rebellion, right? And the shots of K2SO, who I'm assuming is K2SO, the droid version, at least the droid variant. And you see Krennic, and what you see here is that a war is brewing, and this is the beginnings, the seeds of the rebellion. What I'm kind of interested in, though, is that this season looks like it's focusing on the Death Star a lot more than I thought, because I was like, well, didn't we do that with Rogue One already? So I'm kind of curious to see how it's going to differentiate itself from Rogue One, knowing that Rogue One is where you really get the Death Star plan. So this whole season, what are they fighting against, really? Maybe that's my question here. But still, it looks great. Andor looks great. We get some dialogue from Bix, from Luthen, from Mon Mothma. It looks like things are getting really desperate out there. But again, I mean, this is the trailer, right? The grittiness of it all, and seeing the war, seeing it on the ground with the music. Guys, this, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being jaded and being an old curmudgeon-y Star Wars fan. But I don't get what the pop music was for. This music... And the Imperial sirens, it's so perfect. And this trailer alone, this trailer alone ratchets up my excitement, 5-10 times, because it's so good. It shows you all the things you loved about Andor Season 1, just the groundedness, the great writing, the dialogue, and the character work, the acting. It's all fantastic. It's all back here. And a little bit more of the stakes, right? With Ben Mendelsohn coming back, or as Director Krennic, Saw Gerrera, Forrest Whitaker, K2SO, and you're getting the stakes of the Death Star as well. They're building a weapon. We saw a little bit of that at the end of Andor Season 1. So I'm super excited. I think that this trailer, to me, really exemplifies all the reasons why we should be excited for Andor Season 2. I cannot wait. Guys, what did you think of the second trailer for Andor Season 2? Did you like it, or did you actually like the first trailer better? If so, totally great. I respect that, and I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys. Well, we're getting closer every single day. This is an objective fact. We're getting closer to Avengers Doomsday. Unless it gets moved again, in which case we're not getting closer to Avengers Doomsday. But it seems like, for the most part, Avengers Doomsday is still on track. And there have been reports and there have been rumors and things like that the Kevin Feige is a little bit concerned because of the Electric State, the movie that the Russo brothers have just recently directed and released, which is not getting good reviews, to put it kindly. It's getting very terrible reviews, in fact. But the Russo brothers, whenever they make MCU projects, they've been amazing. And so whenever they've not made MCU projects, other than Community and the projects they did before Captain America the Winter Soldier, they have been terrible. So, and I'm talking about not for me personally, just for the critics, right, in general. So it remains to be seen how they handle Avengers Doomsday and Avengers Secret Wars. But every time they enter the MCU, they seem to do really well. So I'm hoping that that's the case. Anyways, we'll probably end up doing a segment at some point predicting the entire roster for Avengers Doomsday. Hopefully before, anything gets announced, because I think it'd be fun to kind of predict what's going to go on, what's going to happen in the story and whatnot. But a character that we saw those quote-unquote leaked images, which I don't know if they really are leaked concept art. The Russo brothers deny it. Who knows, right? Who knows? But in one of them, we saw She-Hulk in what is being dubbed as Greenland from the comics. This is a Hulk village where a bunch of Hulks are just hanging out. Not that Greenland. The Greenland of, I guess, referring to a bunch of Hulks just hanging around. And it looks like that was a variant, right? These are variants of Hulks, I think, one would think. So it looks like Jennifer Walters is there and hanging out with Bruce Banner in some kind of version of a bunch of Hulks just hanging around. But I think the question is the version in Earth 616 of Jennifer Walters as She-Hulk, is she ever going to come back? And honestly, I had my doubts. Not because of She-Hulk in particular, but because I think the MCU just needed to focus on a core group of characters, and it's for the same reasons that I don't think Moon Knight is going to have a presence, a big presence, if any, at all, in Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars, or Werewolf by Night, or Blade, or the Eternals, or a bunch of other characters that, yes, have been a part of the MCU, but just, I don't think fit into the story that we're going to be telling here. Who knows? I could be totally wrong. The Eternals could be the key to Secret Wars for all I know. It could be possible. So, I've been operating under that assumption. However, there is a rumor going around, and I'm going to file this somewhere in between a rumor and a report, right? We've talked about this many, many times. The sources you should trust: Hollywood Reporter, Variety, Deadline. And then there are other reporters that have scoops that are generally accurate, though I never really qualify that as news per se, just rumors and reports. And this is coming from comicbookmovie.com, which, I don't know the reputability of them in terms of scooping. I know that they generally report on the news pretty well. That's just my assumption, my understanding. So take this with a grain of salt. And we're gonna file this under rumor for now. Rumor and report. Between rumor and report. But there is something going around that says not only is Jennifer Walters going to reprise her role, Tatiana Maslany is going to reprise her role as Jennifer Walters in Avengers Doomsday, but she might have a significant role. So this is what happened. And I'm going to read from a direct article, the direct article that talks about what happened in this comicbookmovie.com article. So it says, quote, a canceled Comic-Con appearance as discovered by CBM, Comic Book Movie, may have indicated when Tatiana Maslany is set to return to the MCU as Jennifer Walters / She-Hulk. In mid-March, Comic-Con Liverpool announced that Maslany had to cancel her planned appearances at the event, which take place from May 3rd to May 4th, 2025. One theory that has fans intrigued indicates that this is being due to the fact that she is set to be filming as She-Hulk in Avengers Doomsday at that time. So that's all speculation. But then the quote continues. Additionally, CBM dug into the news and reported it to be accurate. So that's where this rumor report is coming from. On top of the fact that she will reportedly be in Avengers Doomsday, Maslany's role in the film is said to be fairly significant. Okay. So again, let's file this all under rumor and report because we don't know if this is true. We don't know how accurate this all is. Do I believe that this is true? Honestly, not really. And it's not because I don't want Tatiana Maslany to return. I've said this before. I think that she would be a great addition to return in the MCU because I don't think that She-Hulk was her fault. And I'm not even saying this as someone who hates She-Hulk wholeheartedly and holistically. I think there are problems with She-Hulk. There are scenes in She-Hulk that I just don't jive with. But in terms of overall product, I don't think it was great, but I don't think Tatiana Maslany was the problem with it. So would I have a problem with her returning to the MCU? No. I just don't see, and this is my own personal bias, my own personal opinion speaking, I don't see a version of Avengers Doomsday where she has a significant role in the same way that I don't see a version, again, it has nothing to do with Tatiana Maslany, it's nothing to do with a female Avenger or anything like that. I know that there are people out there who believe that, and I think that that's terrible, that, oh yes, a female Avenger shouldn't have a big role. No, none of that. But in terms of She-Hulk, I frankly don't understand what her role would be in Avengers Doomsday. This is me saying this, having zero information on what the plot of Avengers Doomsday actually is. And I say this as someone who, frankly, I don't know what Hawkeye's role will be in Avengers Doomsday. I mean, he always finds himself on the team. I don't know. I just don't know. So right now, and I only go off of this because the report says fairly significant, right? Because, Hawkeye for sure had a fairly significant role in Avengers Age of Ultron. So maybe it's in that way, or maybe she's somehow the emotional core of the movie. That would be interesting, right? So I don't know what her role could be. I'm just more talking about in terms of plot. Like fairly significant as in they send her on a mission that is really important to face Doctor Doom. Maybe. It could be possible. So really, this is less of me saying I don't want it to happen and me just me just going, I really can't fathom what that is right now. That being said, I'm totally open to whatever the Russos, McFeely are cooking up, and I think that it would be interesting. And I just want to see Tatiana Maslany back, and I really want her to be in a project where fans don't just hate on it, rightly or wrongly, whatever your opinion is. I hope that she can come back to the MCU in a way where people really fall in love with her and her character in the MCU. So, what do you guys think of this rumor? We're going to call it a rumor, that Tatiana Maslany will be returning in Avengers Doomsday as She-Hulk, but not only that, she will have a significant role. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so one of the biggest shows recently, or perhaps most trendy shows of the past few years, has just wrapped up its second season. We are here today to talk about everything Severance Season 2. So, before we get into it, I just want to give a heads up with the format. This review is going to be a non-spoiler and spoiler. I know that the show has been out for a little bit now, at least the last episode, but maybe some of you guys wanted to wait to binge the entire thing or haven't gotten caught up with the last couple episodes. So this review is going to be non-spoiler first, so we're going to be talking about Severance Season 2 in as vague detail as we possibly can, and then we're going to talk about it in spoilery detail afterwards, and there's going to be a clear delineation of when I switch to spoilers, so no worries about that. And if you want to click away after the non-spoiler section, then by all means do so, and then come back once you have seen the season. So let's get into Severance Season 2. I like to always start out my reviews with a little bit of context, with at least my opinion about how I was thinking about the series or the movie going into it, because I think it's important. Like I always say this, I think it's important to understand where the person you're listening to is coming from, so that at the very least, even if you completely disagree with their opinions about the show or the movie, you can understand where they're coming from when they are talking about their views. So with Severance was a show that everyone on the internet was very, very in tune with when the first season came out. It was sort of a cult kind of show where it had a cult following, and it really gained some popularity and steam because of the unique concept. The first season and the general premise of the show in totality is that you go into this office and you have an inside personality, an innie, and an outside personality, an outie. And once you go into the office, you are part of your inside personality, or you are completely your inside personality, your innie. And then once you leave, you separate, and the innie doesn't remember anything as you transition back to your outie, and vice versa throughout basically the rest of the time as you work at this company called Lumen. And there are obviously a lot more complicating factors that go on, especially with the main character played by Adam Scott named Mark. And there are some other big cast members. And I'm just trying to be as vague as possible. But we'll talk about a little bit about Severance Season 1, because I think Severance Season 1 is important to understand my context, how I came into Severance Season 2. Because honestly, with Severance Season 1, I was a little disappointed with the show. Not because I didn't think the concept wasn't original, or not because I didn't think that the show was interesting or anything like that. I thought the ending was a little disappointing. And I'm not saying that seasons of shows can't have cliffhangers or things that make you want to see the next one, right? But I'm a big advocate of, you got to wrap up at the very least the central heart of your story before you move on. And it's totally fine. Leave some things to mystery, leave some things unanswered, leave some things for the next season, hopefully. But we always have to be operating under the assumption, is my belief at the very least, that we're just not going to get another season or another, a follow-up to it. Because look, even if the next season is automatically greenlit, and we talked about last week that Severance Season 3 has been greenlit, so they probably knew that going into, or maybe they didn't. I don't know. Maybe they did or maybe they didn't. But it's officially greenlit for Season 3. But I think we always have to operate under the assumption that you just may never get to make the next thing, right? And you have to end the story in a way that doesn't have to be a happy ending for everyone, but the story you are trying to tell within that narrative has to have some definitive finiteness to it, is my opinion. That's just my opinion. So with Severance Season 1, I just felt like they left the ending way too open-ended. She's alive, and that opens up a whole can of worms, right? It answers a question of, okay, so now we know Gemma Scout is alive, and that's it. And they do the overtime contingency, and it kind of works, it kind of doesn't work, and we have no idea what happened after that, because it's revealed that Helly is really Helena Egan. And so, again, just answering or opening up way more questions than answering, and just leaving us wanting. So heading into Season 2, I was just honestly not super excited, but I heard the reviews. Everyone said this is one of the best seasons of television ever. It's one of the greatest things they've seen in quite a while, and I was like, okay, so we'll see. I enjoyed the concepts of Season 1 quite a lot. I just don't know if it really grabbed me in the same way that other shows, other more dramatic shows like Stranger Things or Sherlock or whatever have. And so I was just curious entering Season 2. So then we get into season 2. And I haven't been talking about it weekly on the channel just because the episodes, frankly, it's a timing thing. The episodes come out on Friday and I upload the podcast on Friday. And so there was just no guarantee I would get around to watching the whole episode, making a segment about it, putting it into the main podcast and uploading it. So I've just been quietly watching it, but I want to talk about the whole thing now. And what I will say about season 2 is I really liked it. Here's the thing about season 2. I think that season 2 was on a razor's edge the entire season. And the reason I say that is because it continues the same sort of trajectory that season 1 had of just bringing up question after question after question. What season 2 does a little bit better though than season 1, I think again it was on the razor's edge, but it I think strikes that balance where it starts to answer some things that I think are set up to be answered, right? I think that in season 1, what I was a little disappointed by was that it raises so many questions that I think you expect to be answered and they just leave them open-ended. And I think season 2 does a much better job, in my opinion, of, yes, having those questions out there, but then starting to peel back the layers a little bit. Season 2, I will say, and I don't think this is a spoiler at all, leaves you with so many questions at the end of it. And I think, though, the difference between the end of season 2 and the end of season 1, again, no spoilers, is that the kinds of questions that you're asking at the end of season 2 are more, okay, so what's going to happen now? Because not in the sense of I'm confused, what does this mean, what is it, but more of just the central questions of, okay, you left a few things hanging, and I'm not going to lie, I'm still a little bit disappointed that they left a few things just completely dangling, but the central questions you're asking at the end of season 2 are, I really want to know where the story goes next, versus season 1 where I'm going, what is happening? What does this mean, right? And not in the way of, what does this really, symbolize? It's just literally, what does this mean? And I think that's a key difference between season 1 and season 2. The performances in season 2, Adam Scott, Britt Lauer, I think, who plays Helly, great. Zach Cherry, who plays Dylan, awesome as always, and John Turturro, who plays Irving. The core 4, as I have dubbed them just now, they're fantastic as always. I think some characters in the season have more to do than others. I think, for example, Irving has very little to do, honestly, relatively compared to the other characters. I think Dylan's arc in this season is quite interesting, a little bit more subtle, but I think quite compelling. But this is obviously, as we saw at the end of season 1, this is slowly transitioning into a story more about Helly and Mark as the two leads, and I think that's great. And Mark, we get a lot about Mark in this season in terms of Adam Scott gets to play with a lot of different facets of his character, which I really, really enjoy. Again, this being non-spoiler, I can't really talk about what the season's actually about, other than the fact that at the end of season 1, if you've seen season 1, and I'm sorry if you haven't, spoilers for that, but they do the overtime contingency, and their innies are outside in the world for just a little bit there, and then they, that's where the season ends, and so we really don't get a sense of, okay, where do we go from here? And so season 2 goes in a bunch of interesting directions, and I will say, there are some episodes that are a little weaker than others, right? I think that there are some episodes where you're going, this is confusing, but not in the right way. But I think most of the episodes are very gripping. There's one episode in particular towards the latter half that I was going, this is really starting to tie some things together and allow the show to really make some sense. And I think by the time you get to the very end, it reaches that point where it feels satisfying. Because, look, throughout the entire season of Severance Season 2, I was saying to myself, this show is on a razor's edge, like I said before, because it's leading you along. And every episode you're asking, okay, what's happening? What's going on? Question. And I was thinking to myself, if the finale of this season doesn't deliver satisfyingly, then the entire season falls apart. So it was interesting to me hearing the critics going into the show say this is one of the greatest seasons of television they've seen in quite a while, because I would presume that they saw the whole show, right? And if they saw the whole show, that's great. But for me, as somebody who's watching the show week by week, it made me worried, because I was like, every single episode, I'm sitting here going, this is all super interesting, but I'm not getting that resolution that I think is really necessary. And I think by the end of the show, you really do get it. So again, it's really hard to talk about the show without any spoilers, because you just don't know what's going to happen at the end of season 1 going into season 2. But I will say that this is a show that takes you along for the ride. It asks you to be a little bit patient with it. But I think by the time you get to the end, you're going to be very intrigued by what is happening. And I think some answers are going to be given and some more questions are going to be raised. So those were my non-spoiler thoughts. It's all really vague and hand-wavy, I understand. But if you haven't seen the show, then I would definitely recommend starting with season 1 and then going on to season 2. So let's quickly now transition. This is the official marker where we're going to transition from non-spoiler to spoiler, and then we'll wrap up this segment. So we're going to be diving into spoiler warning. Here we go. Usually what I do in these spoiler segments is I reference things that I just talked about, or I reference vaguely in the non-spoiler section, and draw them out a little bit. So in terms of character arcs, right, I want to start here. I think Irving, honestly, was a little bit disappointing to me because I just don't think he had anything to do in the show. And jumping off of that, while yes, we'll talk about that final scene in the hallway with Gemma, Helly, and Mark, and I think that that's just a brutal scene in all the right ways. I will say that this show still continues to end its seasons with entire plot threads just completely unanswered. And I think that unaddressed, I should say, because unanswered is one thing, right? Where you can be hinting towards, okay, there's something else going on here, stay tuned. Completely unaddressed. One thing is Irving, right? Irving just goes off and rides off into the sunset, and we have no idea where he's going, and no idea what he's up to, and no idea how he's going to factor into season 3. I don't know, maybe it's going to be him and Gemma against the world. Who knows, right? Who knows? And the other character in particular is Miss Huang. Miss Huang is a character, the young girl who's in Lumen, who is on the severed floor. The whole season, everyone's going, what is this kid's deal? Who is she? What's going on with her? And she just gets on a shuttle and doesn't show up again in the finale. I think, again, this show, I don't know if it was assured to them that they were going to get a season 3, but to me, it's like, if you're going to, I don't know where these characters went, because we're invested in them now, and you don't have to spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes with every single little loose plot thread, but it's just, I'm like, okay, well then now we're gonna have to wait another 2 years or another 3 years before we get Severance season 3 to find out. So anyways, it's just a little bit of a frustration, but what I love though about the finale is the dilemma, right? Because I myself, I'm watching the finale, and you get to that last scene, and I am literally saying out loud, Mark, go out the door, walk out the door, walk out the door. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that this is not the Mark that you're rooting to get out the door, because this Mark is the innie Mark who understands if he walks out the door, he could be dead. And that's scary. I mean, you just imagine putting any human being in that position, in those shoes, to say, look, I mean, there's somebody out there who's asking you for their help, and if you walk out the door, you're going to help them, but you're going to die. That's a terrifying decision. And on the other hand, so maybe if Helly wasn't there, he would have done it, but Helly shows up and he's like, this is it. I mean, we're fighting for our own lives now. And I think that's powerful. I'm glad Gemma got to escape. It's heartbreaking that she doesn't get to be outside with Mark. Hopefully at some point they will be outside together. I don't know if she's going to go back into the severed floor at any point, but it's really, it's exciting because we get some really interesting plot threads to pull from in season 3, but it's also frustrating because we don't get to see that for quite a while. And I think that it's, it brings up all the right kinds of, oh my gosh, I wonder what happens next in this story, which I think is a really good thing. Throughout the season, I got a couple weaker episodes. I definitely think season 2, episode 8, was it? The one with Miss Cobell, Patricia Arquette was... I don't understand that episode at all. It was bizarre. Was it episode 9? No, it was episode 8, right? It was episode 8. What a weird and bizarre and kind of terrible episode. I don't understand that episode at all. I think another one, I thought the one at the Hollow, the retreat one, was okay. It was a little strange. And at that point, you're just kind of going, yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're going to figure something out with this, and it never kind of comes up again. The goats, I mean... to have this whole section of the MDR wing, or of the severed floor, just be goats, and then just have one to sacrifice at the end. I'm sure we're going to get more of an explanation. It seems very, ancient rituals, kind of animal sacrifice sort of deal. So we'll see where that goes. But yeah, there's a lot more to answer here. I think the interesting thing about the Egan father, who says to the innie Helly, he's like, I see the fire of Kira in you. I think that's going to be something that they'll play into as well. So a lot of exciting and interesting things going into Severance season 3. And the bottom line is that the difference between season 1 and season 2, after season 1 ended, I was like, yeah, I mean, if they do a season 2, I'll definitely watch it, but I'm not excited about it because I was just left kind of dangling, right? And with season 3, I am genuinely very excited about it whenever it does happen, because I think that this is the kind of excitement that you want to build with the end of your season. So guys, have you seen Severance season 2? I'm assuming that if you're still hanging around here, you have. What did you think about it, and are you excited about season 3? Also, what are your theories for season 3? What are some of the things that you hope to happen? Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty guys, let's get right to it. There is so much to talk about with the confirmation, the announcement of the cast of Avengers Doomsday. I'm not calling it the full cast. We'll talk about that later on in the podcast. But I would say a significant part of the cast of Avengers Doomsday. There is so much to talk about, so much so that as of right now, we're going to have multiple segments. And we're going to have 3 segments for now. We could even add more or more and talk about other things as the week progresses, and I'm able to add them to the podcast. But for right now, we're going to have 3 segments. The first one here, I'm going to talk about just the cast list in general, and then we'll talk about some other really interesting things to come out of it that I'm looking forward to. So first of all, let's just dedicate an entire segment to talk about who's on this list, because it is incredible that they, people are online saying this is the dumbest way to announce the cast with the whole chairs and doing the live stream for 5 hours, whatever. I mean, what? Did you want an entire trailer for a movie that hasn't even started shooting yet? Did you want, I don't know, every single actor to say hi and dress up in their costumes? Did you want every act? I don't understand. Like, it's sure, it wasn't the most simple way to do it. They could have just released a press release and then been done with it. I think that's terrible as well. So honestly, for all the people complaining about how they announced it, I don't really care that much. It's like at the end of the day, what this was supposed to do was give us the names. And we got the names. So I frankly, I don't understand. Because the movie is going to come out whether or not we know the cast or not. It's not like they're saying Avengers Doomsday coming out next week. That's a huge deal if we don't know that, for 5 hours. I don't know. That's just me. But let's go through the cast list here. So I have a list pulled up of everyone in the cast in order of how they've been announced. And I don't know if this order is specific in any way. It doesn't seem like it other than the grouping that was later on. We'll talk about that in just a second. But let's get to it. So first of all, starting with 3 big characters. Or I mean, 2 out of the 3 are big characters. The other one we knew was going to be in Avengers Doomsday, and she's part of the Fantastic Four. So Chris Hemsworth as Thor. Now, I think the Russos, I'm not going to talk for 5 minutes for every single character, by the way. We have so much to get to, but just a little bit about most of them. Chris Hemsworth, I think the Russos have done the best job with Thor. They've also done probably the worst job with Thor next to Thor Love and Thunder and Endgame. But Avengers Infinity War showed that they understood Thor. They really got Thor, his comedic timing, but also his pain. And I'm hoping that they can really bring that to light here in Avengers Doomsday. So I'm very excited. Also, the fact that he was up first shows, along with Anthony Mackie and Vanessa Kirby, who, from all accounts, seems like she's going to be one of the main leads of Fantastic Four First Steps, not just, as part of the Fantastic Four, but actually one of the emotional centers and really up in front of the Fantastic Four. I'm really excited about that. So these 3 characters seem very significant that they were announced up front. So Chris Hemsworth, very exciting. He's probably going to be one of the leaders of this Avengers team. Vanessa Kirby, going to be instrumental, I think, coming from the Fantastic Four universe. And Anthony Mackie, of course, going to be, I would say, the de facto leader of the Avengers as Captain America. That's really, really exciting. So then we get to Sebastian Stan as Bucky Barnes. And right away, people were online saying, they spoiled Thunderbolts, and we know who's going to live and who's going to die and whatnot. I mean, yeah, sure, Taskmaster isn't on this list. I mean, is it any secret right now that they're not going to keep Taskmaster around? I don't know. So everyone was like, oh, they've confirmed that they're going to keep everyone alive and Sentry's here. Guys, I mean, I get it. Like, sure, would it have been interesting to go into Thunderbolts not knowing anything about what's coming after it? I guess, sure. I would prefer that over the alternative, I suppose. We live in a world where Spider-Man Far From Home was announced and filmed before Avengers Endgame came out, when we thought, or when they wanted us to think that Spider-Man was dead. Like, they had trailers for Spider-Man Far From Home coming out before Avengers Endgame came out. So I don't understand what this, uproar is about. It's fine. Like, sure, they're going to live. Having characters die is not the only way to have stakes in movies. I point back to Spider-Man No Way Home. The memory wipe scene where Peter says goodbye to MJ and Ned is a devastating scene, and nobody died. I mean, you could argue that they lost, whatever. Nobody died. So I don't get this whole line of thinking. Anyways, let's move on. Letitia Wright as Black Panther. Good to see her back in the MCU. Paul Rudd as Ant-Man. Also, I love Paul Rudd. He's amazing. So him as Ant-Man coming back, great. Eventually, Lily, I guess, retired from acting or something like that. She's stepping away. So she, I guess, is not coming back for Avengers Doomsday and Secret Wars. Wyatt Russell, John Walker. That's, when we heard Sebastian Stan, I would assume, I guess Sebastian Stan, he would be in an Avengers film, maybe with or without the Thunderbolts. But Wyatt Russell, when we saw his name, it was like, okay, we're going to get the whole cast of the Thunderbolts who survived the film. Looks like pretty much everyone. Then we get Tenoch Huerta Mejia as Namor. And this is interesting because we get another Black Panther character later on, but it's really interesting, right? Because it looks like they're going to be really drawing from that storyline of Talokan and Wakanda kind of being at odds, but in a very uneasy alliance, right? And I think that is, that's going to be a very interesting thing to pull from, especially given that there's a lot of tension going on in the world with Thunderbolt Ross having recently been imprisoned and what's going on, stability wise with adamantium and whatnot. So I think that this is really interesting that he is going to be a part of the film. And I think it makes sense. I would be interested to see where they go with Wakanda. Eben Moss Backrack as the Thing. Yep, totally makes sense. Fantastic Four. This one, the next one up here, got the biggest reaction out of me as I was watching it throughout the day. Simu Liu as Shang-Chi. I've said it before and I will continue to say it again. It is baffling to me that they have not made Shang-Chi 2 yet. Because Simu Liu as Shang-Chi is one of the best things that the MCU has ever done since Endgame. And the fact that he is coming back, because again, it wasn't guaranteed to be in this announcement. I mean, for all we know, they're going to do a part 2 of this in a week, and they're going to announce the rest of it with Doctor Strange and Hulk and whatnot, and that would be fine. That'd be great. And so if Simu Liu wasn't on this announcement, maybe he would have been still in the movie, but just the fact that he's up here, it makes me so happy. I'm so happy that he's here. So, really great. Florence Pugh as Yelena, of course, love that. And then, Kelsey Grammer as Beast. And Kelsey Grammer as Beast could have shown up in the movie. By the way, we'll talk about this in another segment where we talk about who's not on this list, but Kelsey Grammer as Beast showing up pretty much confirms characters like Monica Rambeau and Maria Rambeau are going to show up who are not on this list, so look out for that. I mean, I think that there are a lot of characters who are just not on this list, but who are definitely going to be in the movie, but we'll get to that. So Kelsey Grammer as Beast, I think that was the first hint of, okay, we're really going to dive into that other universe, or maybe even just a separate universe, maybe even the X-Men 97 universe, who knows, but I think that's really exciting. I love the fact that they're going to bring him back. And then Lewis Pullman as Sentry. What's his role going to be? Is he going to be part of Doom's team? Is he going to be good at the end? I don't know. He's a complicated character, so we'll have to see about that. Danny Ramirez as Falcon was another lock just because of the end of Captain America Brave New World. If they showed us that scene where Falcon's like, or Captain America's like, be ready, Falcon, and he's like, okay. And then they just never included him in the movie. That'd be kind of weird. Joseph Quinn as Human Torch, of course, excited. David Harbour as Red Guardian, very excited. Winston Duke as M'Baku, so again, including more cast members. He is also the ruler of Wakanda, from what I understand from the end of Black Panther Wakanda Forever, so that'll be interesting to see how Wakanda plays into Doom. Maybe Doom is after Adamantium, maybe Doom is after Vibranium, who knows? That could be interesting. Hannah John Kamen, Ghost, also great. And then Tom Hiddleston as Loki. So it's confirmed that, the TVA or whatever Tom Hiddleston is up to, Loki's up to at the end of time, that's going to be a big part of whatever is going on with Doomsday. And I think that's exciting. I'm very excited about that. And then I pose the question every single time of what are people going to think who haven't seen the Loki series? Are they just going to be like, why is he back again? So I think that the Russos have their hands full even more so, because for Endgame, people were like, wait a second, I haven't seen all these movies. What's going on? And, you have to explain everything to them. I think even more so with Doomsday because of the TV shows, but we'll see how they handle that. And then we get to the X-Men, because then it starts going Patrick Stewart, and I'm like, okay, Patrick Stewart, Kelsey Grammer, Ian McKellen. So excited to see Ian McKellen back as Magneto. That's awesome. Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Rebecca Romijn, James Marsden, Channing Tatum. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's not all the X-Men, but you got Gambit, Cyclops, Mystique, Nightcrawler, Magneto, Charles Xavier, and I'm sure there are going to be more. I would assume there's going to be more. That's so exciting. It's just so exciting. I think out of all of them, Ian McKellen, I'm the most excited about. He's getting up there in age, I know, but it's still just going to be great to see him. He's iconic as Magneto and of course as Gandalf. And I think that this, we'll talk about this in the next segment, I think, with the X-Men coming in. But this really opens the door for a lot of interesting possibilities. And then rounding it out, here we have Pedro Pascal, of course, as Mr. Fantastic, and Robert Downey Jr. himself as Dr. Doom. So that is the full list that they announced in this little video, or this live. No, it wasn't a little video, it was a pretty big live stream, but I'm excited, guys. I think that this is a really interesting group of characters to dive into here. I will talk about this at the end of the podcast and in another segment. I just cannot, I cannot believe that they're done. It doesn't make sense. And I just don't think that this, I can't believe that this is it. And we've gotten confirmation from other characters or other actors that their characters are going to be coming in. So I think more to come, but this is a very exciting first list. So guys, what do you think about just on first reaction, the list for the cast of Avengers Doomsday? I'm really excited about it. I think it's interesting who's not here. We'll talk about that in just a second, but let me know in the comments down below. Alright guys, so jumping off the Doomsday cast in general, I wanted to talk about a very specific subset of characters. I'm sure you guys know what I'm talking about based on the segment title or the thumbnail, but let's talk about the X-Men, because the X-Men, not just any X-Men, but the X-Men from the original cast, right? Interesting to note there's no Michael Fassbender or James McAvoy, but we have, characters who have already reprised their roles in other multiversal forms, variant forms in previous MCU movies like Patrick Stewart and Kelsey Grammer for just a hot second. And then we have other characters who we haven't seen in 20 years. I mean, we had, to be fair, in Deadpool and Wolverine, we had a few characters like that, with Sabretooth showing up for maybe 2 minutes and Toad was there for a second in some version of Juggernaut. So it's been happening. They've been planting the seeds, and now it really comes to fruition here. So it's confirmed. Let's just go over this list again in terms of X-Men. We get Kelsey Grammer as Beast, Patrick Stewart as Charles Xavier, Ian McKellen as Magneto, Alan Cumming as Nightcrawler, Rebecca Romijn as Mystique, James Marsden as Cyclops, and Channing Tatum as Gambit. And it's exciting. So it seems like we are going to be getting a full-fledged X-Men team. Whether or not this is the same team from that universe where Kelsey Grammer's Beast was, I would assume so, just for the ease of continuity, right? For those people who stayed to watch the end credit scene of The Marvels, which, to be fair, not a lot of people did, because that movie only made about $200 million. But still, for those people who did stay, I think it would be interesting, and I think it would make sense to just continue on with that universe, or whatever that universe was that Monica Rambeau ended up in, where she ends up with Kelsey Grammer's Beast, and then he says something like, I got to talk to the professor. So I would assume it's that same X-Men universe. People have been speculating for a long while that universe is the X-Men 97 universe. I wouldn't be too surprised, if this cast ends up being the X-Men 97 cast in live action. I think that would be super interesting, because all of these characters, I guess except for Mystique, right, wasn't a huge part of the X-Men 97 at least. I haven't seen the original animated series, so I'm sure she shows up there and is a big part of it. I just don't know. But I think that these characters all are very interesting. And I think that it for me, I said that it was Ian McKellen who was the most exciting for me to see back as his character, because he is just iconic as Magneto. And I love him. And I'm really excited to see him again. What I think is interesting about this, though, is that, we've all been talking, at least I have been, and I think a lot of us have been, that, the next saga, it looks like we're closing this one up here with Avengers Doomsday, and then we're going to head into what we all assume is the Mutant Saga, although there have been whispers that it's going to be the Cosmic Saga or something else. But I would assume the X-Men related saga, very X-Men heavy, mutant heavy, right? And there are a lot of mutants here, obviously. But I think it's interesting that, I had always assumed that, you're going to end that mutant saga with Avengers versus X-Men. It looks like they're doing some version of Avengers versus X-Men here. Granted, I don't think it's Earth 616 X-Men. I highly doubt that. I'm sure that these X-Men characters are going to be coming from a different universe. Maybe they're already under Doom's control. That would be something that's interesting, because one thing from the end of Captain America Brave New World that we remember is that, spoilers for that film, by the way, is that the leader is like, you have to, what are you going to do when you have to protect the world from the others, right? And he didn't say Dr. Doom, he said the others. So, if it's true that the reports are that this film is going to be about Earth 616 sort of protecting itself against other universes as they all kind of struggle as incursions are happening and whatnot, and different things are going on, and their universes are collapsing, and they all have to fight for their own universe, I think it would make sense, right, to pit universes against one another. I think that is a total, that totally makes sense. So I think it is interesting that we are sort of going to get Avengers versus X-Men just right now. And I think that that's an interesting thing to monitor here, whether, how much they go into that, or some version of an Avengers team versus an X-Men team, I think would be very interesting. Also, the fact that we have another, I would assume another universe where it's the Fantastic Four, right, where they're coming from their own universe. Although, again, it's possible, I suppose, that they come from the same universe as these X-Men. Who knows, right? But, I think we already have 3 universes at play, not to mention, probably many more to come. And so I think it's interesting, right? I would say that, for the most part, Doom is going to be pulling the strings as these other universes sort of fight for their own survival as he works towards some greater plot, probably related to Loki, I would assume. And we'll see where that goes from there. I'm just super excited, though, to see this original X-Men team. I think that, again, Multiverse and Multiverse Saga have not worked out super well. In general, right? I've liked a decent bit of the projects. I've, enjoyed them to a certain extent, but I think that just the concept and the way that they've executed it has just not been super stellar. And I think that if you're going to close it out, though, to be just a love letter to the original Marvel heroes and whatnot, and I think that that's what they've been doing with films like Spider-Man No Way Home, for example. I think that that's totally, that's a good way to go about it. So I'm interested, and I'm curious to see what role the X-Men have to play here. I don't think that these X-Men are going to be the X-Men that we see in the future. I just think that they're going to cast much younger, and it's going to be completely different. So we'll have to see. Maybe Channing Tatum comes back as Gambit, although I highly doubt that, just because I think they want to go younger. But we'll see where they go from there. Guys, what do you think of the X-Men's inclusion? It was very prominent in this original cast announcement for Avengers Doomsday. Let me know in the comments down below. Alrighty, guys, so in talking about the Doomsday cast announcement, I've been teasing this here, and I think this is something we should dedicate an entire segment to. Let's talk about all the people that aren't on this list. And, I think on the one hand, right, and for those of you who haven't read the entire list out, or who haven't seen the entire list, it's out there. I did an entire segment earlier on the podcast, and and so you can go check that out. But I think it's interesting, right? I think we could all be tempted to say, well, wait a second, right? How, maybe this is just the list. Maybe the Avengers aren't going to be every single person, that was ever in the MCU, and maybe we're just not going to have them. That's fine. Totally fair. However, the huge caveat to this is that while we haven't gotten official news from Disney that certain actors are going to be reprising their roles in Avengers Doomsday, we've gotten reports from very, very reputable sources within Hollywood. That being, Deadline, Hollywood Reporter, Variety. Those are very, very reputable sources. And maybe plans change, right? But all the sources are indicating Tom Holland is going to film, not Oppenheimer, The Odyssey. He is filming The Odyssey. And then he's going to be filming Spider-Man 4. No, he's going to be filming Avengers Doomsday. And then he's going to be filming Spider-Man 4. Like, those three films were always, all three of them were on the docket this year for Tom Holland. So it's interesting, right? Because who's absent? I was waiting for this, honestly, for the entire announcement, and it just never came. I was waiting for Tom Holland to show up, and he just never did. So that's one actor. We've also gotten reports from these sources that actors like Chris Evans and Haley Atwell were going to be a part of this film, right? Benedict Cumberbatch. We did a whole thing about this where, 1 week he says, I'm not going to be in Avengers Doomsday, so maybe, he was right. And then turns out, nope, he actually was like, I am going to be in Avengers Doomsday. Sorry about that. But, it's interesting, right? Because he said, I'm not going to be in Avengers Doomsday. And then shortly after, he said, oh no, I am. So somebody corrected him, somebody that he trusts to be reputable, right, within Marvel, and said, no, you are in Avengers Doomsday. Whether it was a Russo brother or McFeely or Kevin Feige, I don't know. So it's interesting, right? Because we've gotten confirmation already that several actors who are not on this list are going to be in Avengers Doomsday, apparently. So it's all taken with a grain of salt. I also want to point out here that I think it was the Hollywood Reporter or somebody wrote an article right after this announcement and said basically it was their understanding that that this was not the full announcement. And where and when they're going to make a full announcement, where and when they're going to announce the rest of the cast, who knows? It remains to be seen. But, it's their understanding that this is not the end. Like, this is not every single person who's going to appear in Avengers Doomsday. Whether or not the people that they announced here have some kind of a different role, like maybe they have a bigger role in Avengers Doomsday than the ones that they haven't announced. I don't know. But it feels odd, right? Because there are a bunch of Avengers who are supposed to be here, and who Spider-Man, right, is supposed to be here, and Doctor Strange is supposed to be here, and yet they're not. So I think it's interesting. Let's go through a bunch of characters who I would have a very hard time justifying, why they're not in Avengers Doomsday. Again, it's totally possible, but in my mind, when I'm building a world, and again, we don't know. Like, we don't know what the story of Avengers Doomsday is, but it just seems odd, right? It just seems odd. And I'm sure, by the way, every single one of these people that we're going to talk about here will be in Avengers Secret Wars. I have no doubt about that. So let's talk about it here. I'm also referencing an article from IGN that I think has a pretty good summary of the most interesting omissions from Avengers Doomsday. So let's start out with Peter Parker, Spider-Man. Yeah, where is he? What's going on? Also, Rhodey. Where's Rhodey? So this first category that they have here is the missing Avengers, right? Where's Rhodey? Where's Hulk? Where's Hawkeye? Nick Fury? Pepper Potts and Happy Hogan? Yeah, sure, But, really the big ones here. Where is Tom Holland, Mark Ruffalo, Jeremy Renner? Jeremy Renner, if he's not feeling up for it, that's, again, he's acting again, which is incredible after he nearly died. I would, if he just doesn't feel up for it, then that totally is fine. I'm not saying that it's not fine for the other characters, by the way, the other actors. I'm just saying that, for him, we kind of, it's a special circumstance, I suppose. But yeah, Rhodey, Tom Holland, where are the main Avengers? It's a very interesting thing, that, you would assume, right? Again, they left out Hawkeye and Infinity War, I suppose, but there's nothing in their stories that indicate that they are just not available. Maybe Spider-Man, but Spider-Man is their crown jewel, right? And it doesn't make sense. They go on here, X-Men characters, X-Men related characters. So, interestingly, right, they have a bunch of actors returning for their X-Men roles. What about other X-Men actors like Famke Janssen? Maybe these are more tenuous, right? These are characters who, if they're just not in the movie, they're just not in the movie. And at Paquin, they talk about Shawn Ashmore, Halle Berry. I think Halle Berry is an interesting one because she seemed to be teasing that she was coming back as Storm at one point. But then, here are the two big ones. What about Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds? Are they really not going to be in Avengers Doomsday? They are for sure going to be in Avengers Secret Wars, but yeah, where are they? I don't know. That's just an interesting thing to note there. They talk about then Asgard. So this is, again, these are side characters, and they, I don't know if you're going to put them in a big cast announcement, but it's worth noting characters like Korg and Meek and Valkyrie. But again, I don't know. The other big one, the Guardians of the Galaxy. No guarantee that they would be in this film, but Star-Lord is on Earth, so one would assume that Star-Lord is going to be a part of whatever is going on here. And then there are other Guardians. There's another Guardians team that's alive, as well as the OG Guardians, but, Dave Bautista's not coming back. But, Rocket, Groot, Kraglin, Cosmo, Adam Warlock, and Phyla, and that little creature that they're calling it Blurp. His name's Blurp? Okay. Anyways, they're hanging out there, so we'll see if they show up here. The Marvels. Conspicuously missing, because again, say what you will about the Marvels or Captain Marvel or Miss Marvel or Monica Rambeau, their movies, their shows, whatever, say what you will, they're very important to the MCU. Captain Marvel is, one of the most powerful Avengers, and just to have her not show up for this is super interesting and odd. Miss Marvel, we all thought was going to be a big part of Avengers Doomsday. She's not. She's apparently not in this main cast or whatever this cast is. Maybe this is one side of, maybe they're kind of teasing it out here as this is one, like the universe splits or something like that, and this is just one side of it. I don't know, maybe. But yeah, Monica Rambeau is an even more conspicuous absence because she was with Kelsey Grammer's Beast, and maybe this Beast is another Beast entirely. It would feel a little weird to me that they do something like that, but it's possible. So those characters are not there as well. The magic, then. We have Clea and Doctor Strange, a very conspicuous absence given that this is about the multiverse collapsing, and one would think that Doctor Strange would kind of drop everything he's doing to go figure this out. Wong, also Sorcerer Supreme, America Chavez. Where are they? Scarlet Witch as well, Agatha. Yeah, I don't expect Scarlet Witch or Agatha to show up either. I'm not saying, by the way, as we go through this list, that I'm expecting every single one of the people I'm talking about. I might have mentioned this before. I'm not expecting every single one of these characters to show up here. I just don't think there's room for Agatha. I don't think there's room for Moon Knight or She-Hulk. Not those characters in particular. I'm just saying every single character, or Werewolf by Night, or Blade, or Dane Whitman, or the Eternals. We'll talk about the Eternals in just a second. But yeah, it's just super interesting that these characters aren't here. Speaking of that, IGN is titling this next section Disney minus. That's clever. Characters like Daredevil, Punisher, Vision. White Vision is interesting because he's getting his own show, but he's not here. Sylvie. I thought Sylvie would for sure be there if Loki was there, but guess not. Moon Knight, Echo, She-Hulk, Werewolf by Night. Mobius, TVA. I'm sure Mobius and the TVA are going to be there. I just think they're side characters, but yeah, I think that's super interesting. Quantumania. We talked about Hope Van Dyne. I think Evangeline Lilly is retired from acting or something like that. So but Hank Pym. No Michael Douglas, no Michelle Pfeiffer. I think that's interesting. And Eternals are another interesting category because even if you don't like the movies, they're all just hanging out there. And I don't know, are they just not going to reference them other than Tiamat? Again, that's super interesting. And then the Young Avengers, right? The Young Avengers, also, they mentioned Blade in his own section, which is kind of silly because of all the drama going around with the Blade movie. But the Young Avengers, right? Kate Bishop, Kamala Khan, Scar, America Chavez, Eli Bradley, Ironheart. Where's Ironheart, right? So, again, there are a lot of characters. Like, if I had to boil it down to the ones that I was super surprised didn't show up here, Mark Ruffalo as Hulk, Tom Holland as Spider-Man, Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, really high up there. Brie Larson as Captain Marvel, Iman Vellani as Kamala Khan, and I guess with the announcement of Beast, Teyonah Parris as Monica Rambeau, and then other characters like Hugh Jackman as Wolverine, just based on the fact that this is going to be pretty X-Men centric, although maybe their universe just doesn't get wrapped into it, so who knows. So maybe not them. Maybe we'll save them for Secret Wars, because I'm sure Toby and Andrew will show up for Secret Wars as well. I just think it's super interesting. I have to believe after all this news that this is not the full list because there are just too many characters that, again, it's one thing for me to say, oh, but I really wanted them to be in this movie. And the Russos are like, that's just not the story we're telling. And that's fine. That's totally fine. Like, it's one thing for me to say before Avengers Infinity War, well, I really wanted Ant-Man to be in this movie. And the Russos are going, that's just not the story we're telling. And it wasn't, right? It's one thing for me to say that. It would have been another thing entirely if all the trades before Avengers Infinity War, all the really reputable ones were like, Jeremy Renner and Paul Rudd are spotted on set filming Avengers Infinity War, and like actually Avengers Infinity War, not Endgame, right? And they're like, these two actors have been confirmed to show up in Avengers Infinity War, and that's really what's going on here with characters like Spider-Man and Doctor Strange. These characters are all but confirmed to show up in Avengers Doomsday, and I don't think you just have Spider-Man show up as a cameo. I could be wrong. I don't think you have characters like Doctor Strange just show up as a cameo, right? Also to set up what the world looks like after Doomsday. I'm not saying that Doomsday has to end with world-shattering events. Like, I think Doomsday could end with a resolution where Doctor Doom loses, but sets up whatever Secret Wars is going to be. And, like, the Earth might shatter at the end, the universe might shatter at the end of Secret Wars instead of the end of Doomsday. Totally fine. And so the world can kind of keep on spinning after Doomsday. But I find it hard to believe that this is the fullest. So, guys, what do you think about the characters who are not included in this original initial cast list for Avengers Doomsday? Does it surprise you, or maybe you're just not surprised and you just think that these characters aren't going to be in the film? Whatever you think, let me know in the comments down below. And that will do it for episode number 71 of the Access Blockbusters pod. Like I said, a very Doomsday-centric episode. It's exciting. I mean, it's exciting. It's also kind of curious. We obviously talked about who wasn't in the Doomsday cast list, and we had an entire segment. I recorded the She-Hulk segment before the Doomsday cast announcement, so I think it's even more interesting that there are other reports saying, well, She-Hulk might have a significant role in Doomsday. So a lot of interesting stuff here. A lot of interesting news to talk about in terms of Doomsday, but we are underway, and we might even be seeing some set photos. I know Marvel's going to try to prevent the leaks, so we'll see what we see. I mean, I usually don't report on these, but, you know, Marvel, I mean, they're filming Daredevil Born Again in New York, and I saw the costume, and so all those things, we might be seeing some interesting actors popping up on set, and we'll have to see how that goes. But guys, let me know in the comments what you think about any of the news, and make sure to subscribe, give this video a like. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to rate on the audio platforms, and that will do it for episode number 71 of the Access Blockbusters pod. I will see you guys in the next one.